The sun blazed gently over Royal Crest College in Mitama, its rays glinting off the tall iron gates and manicured lawns. Inside a buzzing classroom, the usual chatter of teenagers filled the air. Laughter, whispers, and the scratch of pens across notebooks. Among them sat Amara Okafor, a 15-year-old girl with neatly braided hair, smooth dark skin, and eyes that carried a softness untouched by cruelty. She was quiet, often blending into the corners, careful never to draw attention. But fate had other plans. That afternoon, as she sat at her desk, a deep flush of shame spread across her cheeks. A red stain had blossomed on her school skirt. Her first period had come unannounced, and the evidence betrayed her to the world. The whisper started softly, then grew louder. "She's stained," a boy hissed. "Look at her skirt." Girls giggled, covering their mouths. Amara's heart pounded. She tugged at her shirt, shifted in her seat, desperate to hide the mark. But the laughter pierced her like arrows. Her eyes burned with tears she refused to shed. She wanted the ground to open and swallow her whole. And then the scraping of a chair broke the chaos. From across the room, Obinna Nwankwo, tall for his age, shy, with deep brown eyes, stood. He rarely spoke, often sitting alone, a quiet figure in the corner. Without a word, he walked to Amara's desk. The classroom fell silent. Obinna removed his school jacket and tied it carefully around Amara's waist, covering the stain. His movements were steady, deliberate, his face calm. The laughter died instantly, the room frozen in disbelief. At that moment, the teacher entered. Her eyes narrowed. "Why are you wearing the wrong jacket?" she snapped at Amara. Before Amara could speak, the cane in the teacher's hand rose, but Obinna stepped forward, his voice steady. "It's mine. I gave it to her." The teacher's eyes flashed. "Then you will be punished." The cane struck Obinna once, twice. His body stiffened, but he did not flinch. He stood tall, his eyes meeting Amara's. "Don't argue. Let me do this," they seemed to say. Amara's chest ached. Gratitude and guilt tangled inside her, too heavy for words. When it ended, the bell rang, and students rushed out. She longed to thank him, but before she could, he was gone, called away, and by the next morning, his seat was empty. Transferred, disappeared. But Amara never forgot the boy who shielded her shame with his jacket and bore pain in her place. She didn't know it then, but that single act of kindness would echo across their lives, binding their fates in ways neither of them could imagine. After Obinna vanished from her school, Amara Okafor's world shifted once more. Not long after, her mother's sudden death shattered the fragile balance of her home. Her father, Chief Uche Okafor, cold and ambitious, brought another woman into the house, and with her came a daughter, Bianca. Amara quickly learned she no longer belonged. The warmth of home dissolved into sharp words and hostile glances. Within weeks, her father sent her away from the grand mansion in Maitama to a distant village in Odi River, Enugu State. At first, Amara wept night after night, her young heart crushed by rejection. But in the quiet embrace of her maternal grandmother, Mama Rose, she found refuge. Mama Rose was no wealthy woman. Her home was a clay house with a zinc roof, surrounded by cassava fields and dusty village roads, yet what she lacked in riches she carried in abundance of love. She would hold Amara close when tears came. "My child," she whispered, "you are not less because they cast you away. Sometimes life plants us in the soil of hardship so we can bloom stronger than the flowers in the city." Under Mama Rose's care, Amara grew into a young woman of quiet beauty. She learned to cook over firewood stoves, to fetch water from the stream, to greet neighbors with respect, and to carry dignity, even in simplicity. Villagers admired her humility, while others her age dreamed of leaving for city lights. Amara found contentment in helping those around her, whether it was assisting an old woman at the market or teaching little children to read by lantern light. But far away, in another world, Obinna Nwankwo's path twisted into darkness. No longer the shy boy from school, he became known as Don Obi, the feared name whispered in the streets of Abuja. He was tall, commanding, powerful owner of businesses, controller of networks, both admired and feared. To the world, he was untouchable. To his enemies, he was ruthless. And yet, despite the steel mask of the Mafia boss, a memory lingered of a girl with downcast eyes and trembling hands, and of a jacket tied gently around her waist. Meanwhile, Amara carried her own memory of him, not of the feared Don Obi, but of the boy who once bore pain for her when the world laughed. Two lives, worlds apart, bound by a single moment of kindness. The evening sun dipped low over Oji River village, painting the clay houses gold. Amara had just returned from the stream, balancing a clay pot of water on her head, when she saw Mama Rose stumble outside their small home. "Grandma!" Amara cried, dropping the pot as water spilled onto the dusty ground. She rushed forward, catching the frail woman before she fell. Mama Rose's lips trembled, her breath uneven. "It's nothing, my child," she whispered, but her trembling hands betrayed her. Panic surged in Amara's chest as neighbors helped rush her grandmother to the village clinic, a modest building with peeling paint and the smell of disinfectant. Inside, a tired doctor examined Mama Rose, then spoke with a grave face. "She needs surgery," he said softly. "Without it, she won't last long. The cost is 1 million naira." The word struck Amara like thunder. 1 million? For a girl who owned nothing but a few coins in an old cloth bag, it was a mountain too high to climb. She sat on a wooden bench outside the clinic, her hands trembling as she clutched Mama Rose's bag. Inside were only a handful of coins, not even enough for pain medicine. Tears welled in her eyes as she peered through the window at the woman who had raised her with love when no one else would. How can I let her go? Amara thought of every possibility, borrowing from neighbors, begging in the market, even praying for a miracle. But deep inside, she knew none of it would be enough. There was only one person left she could turn to. The thought made her chest tighten. Her father, Chief Okafor. Memories flashed the day he turned his back on her, the coldness in his eyes, the laughter of Bianca and her mother when Amara was cast out. She had promised herself never to beg him, never to put herself through that pain again. But this was different. This was for Mama Rose, the only soul who had loved her without condition. With shaking fingers, Amara pulled out the small, old phone she kept tucked away. She scrolled to a number she had not dialed in years. Her throat tightened as the line rang. Once, twice, then a voice answered, smooth, commanding. "Amara," Chief Uche said, almost surprised. "You finally called me." Amara swallowed her pride. "Hello, Dad. Mama is very sick. She needs surgery. It will cost 1 million naira." There was a pause. Then he sighed. 1 million. That is nothing. Come to Abuja. I will give you the money myself. Her breath caught. Abuja, the city she had sworn never to face again. The mansion where Bianca's mocking eyes would pierce her, where her stepmother's sharp tongue would cut deep. She knew her father too well. He never gave without demanding something in return. But this was not about her pride. This was about saving Mama Rose. All right, she whispered at last, her voice breaking. I will come. That night, Amara packed a small bag, a faded dress, her grandmother's scarf, and the old school crest pin she had kept all these years, once belonging to Obinna's jacket. She held it for a long moment, remembering the boy who had stepped forward for her, before tucking it safely into her bag. At dawn, she hugged Mama Rose tightly, her tears wetting the old woman's wrinkled cheeks. I'll bring the money back, Grandma, I promise. Mama Rose's voice was weak, but full of faith. Go, my child, I will be here waiting. Amara nodded, wiped her tears, and stepped onto the dusty road to begin the journey that would change everything. The morning air was cool as Amara Okafor climbed into the crowded train at Enugu Station. Her small bag pressed tightly against her chest inside, a faded scarf, a worn dress, and the school crest pin that carried a memory she could never forget. The train was noisy, filled with traders, mothers with children, men in suits, students with books. But Amara's heart raced with only one thought. I must reach Abuja. I must save Grandma. Hours passed. She leaned her head against the window, fields and forests blurring past. Then she noticed something strange. The low hum of conversations around her wasn't about markets or families. It was whispers, urgent, fearful. Have you heard? A man muttered. They say Don Obi is on this train. The name rippled through the carriage like fire. Women covered their mouths. Men looked away nervously. Amara frowned. She had never heard the name, but the whispers grew. The boss of all bosses, owner of half of Abuja. They say even the police fear him. The sliding door at the end of the carriage banged open. A group of men in dark suits stormed in, their eyes sharp, their voices commanding. We are looking for Don Obi, one barked. Passengers shrank back, avoiding their gaze. Amara lowered her head, clutching her bag tighter. One man's eyes landed on her. You, girl, have you seen Don Obi? Her heart skipped. No, I don't even know who that is, she whispered. The man sneered. Then you will know him soon. Everyone in this city knows Don Obi. They moved on, their heavy boots echoing as they searched the train. Amara exhaled shakily, but then from the corner of her eye, she saw him. A man slumped against the rear door, half hidden. His shirt sleeve was soaked with blood. His face was pale, yet strong jaw clenched, eyes sharp even through pain. Her chest tightened. She could have looked away, pretended she hadn't seen. But compassion overruled fear. Slowly, she moved closer, knelt beside him, and pulled out the faded scarf from her bag. Hold still, she murmured, wrapping it tightly around his wound to stop the bleeding. Her hands trembled at first, then steadied as she cleaned the blood with tissues and water. The man watched her, his gaze piercing. No one had ever touched him without fear or greed. For a moment, he felt something foreign safety. When she finished, Amara looked into his eyes, her voice soft. There, it should hold for now. Silence stretched. Then suddenly, his hand shot out, gripping her wrist. His voice was low but steady. I like you. Marry me. Amara froze, her heart stumbling. She laughed nervously. What? You don't even know me. I know enough, he said calmly. Panic fluttered in her chest. She needed to escape. The only word she could find tumbled out. I can't. I'm already married. His brows lifted. Married? To who? Her lips trembled. She had no name prepared. Then she remembered the whispers in the carriage, the name everyone feared. To Don Obi, the Mafia boss. The man's lips curved in a faint smirk, his eyes glinting with amusement. Before he could speak, the train screeched to a halt. The door burst open. Men in dark suits stormed in, shouting, "Boss! Obi!" They rushed toward him. Amara's blood ran cold. Her eyes darted back to the stranger, whose wrist still held hers. And in that instant, the truth struck her like lightning. The man she had just claimed as her husband, the man whose wound she had bandaged, was none other than Don Obi himself. Her cheeks burned with shock. She yanked her wrist free, clutched her bag, and bolted out of the train before her courage failed her. Behind her, his smirk lingered. And so began the story of Amara Okafor and Don Obi, a story bound by fate, danger, and a single act of kindness. The convoy of sleek black cars rolled through the streets of Abuja like shadows cutting across the night. Inside the middle car, Obinna Nwankwo Don Obi leaned back in silence. His injured arm was still wrapped in the faded scarf a village girl had tied around him. The wound stung, but it wasn't the pain that consumed him. It was the memory of her eyes calm, unafraid, filled with compassion instead of fear. All his life, people had reached for him, either to use him, fear him, or destroy him. But she had reached for him simply because he was bleeding. The cars passed through the towering gates of his Maitama mansion, a fortress of iron and stone. Armed guards lined the walls, cameras blinked at every corner, and the fountain at the entrance sparkled under floodlights. To the outside world, it was a palace. To Don Obi, it was a cage of power. Inside, his private doctor waited. The men guided him to a leather chair, while the wound was stitched and cleaned. Yet even as the needle pierced his skin, his gaze never left the scarf tied around his arm. "Boss," said Marco, his most trusted assistant, standing nearby. "Bleeding is under control. Do you want the scarf removed?" "No." Don Obi's voice was steady, firm. His eyes darkened. "Leave it." Marco hesitated, then nodded. For years, Obinna had been untouchable. His name sent fear through boardrooms and back alleys alike, but tonight, as the convoy brought him home, he carried something more powerful than fear, a whisper of warmth he couldn't shake. At last he spoke. "Find the girl." Marco straightened. "Yes, boss. Do you know her name?" "I don't need a name." Obinna's jaw tightened. "Find her. I want to know everything about her and make sure no harm comes near her." Marco bowed slightly, recognizing the rare weight in his master's tone. As the room grew quiet again, Obinna leaned back, closing his eyes. The world knew him as Don Obi, the ruthless mafia boss who commanded empires. But tonight he wasn't Don Obi. Tonight he was once again the shy boy who once tied his jacket around a girl's waist, the boy who had taken the cane for her without hesitation. And without realizing it, the wheel of fate had begun to turn back toward that memory, toward Amara Okafor. The taxi dropped Amara Okafor in front of tall iron gates in Maitama, Abuja. She clutched her small bag to her chest, her heart racing as she stepped forward. Guards in uniform looked her over with disdain before letting her through. The mansion loomed large, its marble floors gleaming under crystal chandeliers. To any visitor, it was a palace of power. To Amara, it was the cold place that had cast her away. Almost at once, laughter echoed down the grand staircase. Amara Okafor, her stepmother, appeared draped in silk and jewelry, her sharp eyes full of scorn. Beside her walked Bianca, her stepsister, wearing glittering clothes and heavy makeup. Well, well, Ioma sneered, her lips curling. The little village girl has returned. Bianca laughed mockingly. And look at her clothes, Mama. She looks like a maid, not Daddy's daughter. Did you walk all the way here barefoot, Amara? Amara pressed her lips together, her cheeks burning with shame, but she said nothing. Then her father appeared. Chief Uche Okafor, tall and stern in a fine suit, his eyes held no warmth. You came, he said simply. Amara nodded quickly. Yes, Father. Please, I need the money. Grandma's very sick. The doctor said she needs surgery urgently. You promised. Chief Uche rubbed his chin slowly, glancing at his wife. Yes, I remember. But it is not so simple. These things take time. Stay a few days while I arrange it. Her heart sank. She knew this tone. This was the voice of excuses, of delay. No, Father, there is no time. Grandma needs the money now, please. But he waved his hand dismissively. Go and rest. We will talk later. That night, Amara lay awake in the guest room. The walls were lined with paintings and mirrors, but the space felt cold, suffocating. Then she heard voices through the thin wall, her stepmother's sharp tone. This girl is nothing but a burden. Her father's reply was quieter but heavier. We can use her. The debt is growing. They asked for someone young, someone suitable for marriage. Let her be the payment. Amara's blood froze. Her chest tightened as she pressed her ear closer. Then she heard Bianca's mocking laugh. Imagine it. Mama, the poor village girl sold off like a prize. Maybe then she will finally be useful. Tears filled Amara's eyes. She covered her mouth to stop a sob from escaping. The next morning she stood before her father, her voice trembling but firm. I know what you are planning. I will not stay here. I will not be sold. If you cannot give me the money now, then I will go. Her stepmother smirked. How ungrateful. We offer you a future, and you reject it. Chief Uche's eyes hardened. With a snap of his fingers, 2 guards stepped forward. Take her out, he said coldly. Let her taste the harshness of the city. She will crawl back when she has nowhere else to go. The guards grabbed Amara's arms and dragged her outside. The gate slammed shut behind her, leaving her trembling on the pavement. She sank to the ground, clutching her bag to her chest. The image of Mama Rose's weak smile haunted her. And the reality struck deep. She had nothing, no money, no help, and time running out. But deep inside, a flame of determination burned. She would not give up. She would fight for her grandmother's life, even if the world turned against her. The streets of Abuja buzzed with life as cars rushed past and the sun dipped into the skyline. Amara Okafor stood outside the gates of her father's mansion, clutching her small bag, her face streaked with tears. The heavy gates had shut her out, just as her father had shut her out years before. But she couldn't give up. Mama Rose's weak smile haunted her. If I must scrub floors to save her, then I will. Her eyes caught a wooden sign nailed to a post nearby. Cleaners wanted. Apply inside. Her heart skipped. It pointed to a tall, shining building, ahead the Grand Royal Hotel, its glass doors gleaming under the lights, chandeliers glowing through the windows. Amara walked in timidly, her palms sweaty. The lobby smelled of polished wood and flowers. Behind the counter stood Madame Gloria, the supervisor, a woman with sharp eyes and a permanent sneer. "You're here for the job?" Gloria asked, scanning her from head to toe with disdain. "Yes, ma, please, I will work hard." Gloria thrust a broom at her. "Start now, the floors are dirty." And so Amara began her new life. Day after day, she swept marble floors, scrubbed bathrooms until her hands blistered. and polish glass until her back ached. Yet even in her plain uniform, she carried herself with quiet dignity. Some staff whispered about her humility, others mocked her innocence. Madame Gloria mocked her most of all. One afternoon, as Amara scrubbed near the hotel entrance, Gloria's voice cut sharply through the air. You think looking pretty will make you rich? You're nothing but a poor girl with a mop. Laughter rose from a few onlookers. Amara lowered her eyes, scrubbing harder, her face warm with shame. Then the lobby grew tense. A group of men in dark suits entered, their presence heavy, commanding. Behind them walked a tall man in a tailored suit, broad-shouldered, sharp-eyed. The air shifted as staff straightened. It was Don Obi. The Mafia boss had come for a meeting. But as his steps echoed across the marble floor, his eyes landed on her Amara, on her knees, scrubbing, while Madame Gloria scolded her loudly. For a heartbeat, his expression changed. Recognition? His voice cut through the lobby, calm but commanding. Respect my wife. Silence fell. The supervisor froze, her face pale. The other staff exchanged shocked glances. His wife? Amara's heart lurched into her throat. Her cheeks burned. She dropped her brush, shaking her head. Please, don't call me that, she whispered. But Don Obi's gaze lingered. Steady, unreadable. Moments later, he summoned her upstairs to his private suite. The room smelled of leather and cologne, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Abuja skyline. Amara stood near the door, clutching her apron, her heart pounding. Please, she said quickly, her voice trembling. Don't call me your wife. I don't belong to you. I am already in love with someone else. Don Obi's eyes darkened. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Someone else? Amara looked away, her hands trembling. Yes. Silence stretched. Then his words came quiet, firm. You need the money, Amara. That's why you took this job. Don't pretend. Her breath caught. How did he know? There is nothing hidden from me in this city, he continued. His hand slipped into his pocket. He held out a small phone and a card. Take these for emergencies for safety. I cannot, she whispered, shaking her head. I don't want your charity. She tried to push them back, but he slipped them into her apron pocket. His voice was steady. Keep them. Her emotions tangled fear, anger, confusion, and something she couldn't name. When he leaned forward as if to kiss her, panic surged. She shook her head violently, stepping back. No, don't. Before he could stop her, Amara turned and fled the room, her heart racing. Out in the corridor, her breath came in sharp bursts. Yet, as she pressed her back against the wall, a memory pierced through of a boy at Royal Crest College, standing tall as the cane struck him, his jacket tied around her waist. Could it be? Could Don Obi, the feared Mafia boss, be the same Obinna Nwankwo who once saved her from shame? Her heart trembled with the possibility. That night, Amara lay awake in her small staff quarters at the Grand Royal Hotel. The sounds of Abuja's nightlife drifted faintly through the window, honking cars, distant music, voices rising and fading in the streets. Yet her mind wasn't on the city. It was on him. The way Don Obi had looked at her in the lobby, the weight of his voice when he called her his wife, and most of all, the intensity in his eyes when he slipped that phone and card into her apron pocket. She tried to push it aside. He is dangerous. He is not for me. But another memory kept pressing forward. Obinna Nwankwo, the shy boy at Royal Crest College, his jacket around her waist, his steady gaze as the cane struck him again and again. the boy who had disappeared without goodbye. Her chest ached with confusion. Could they be the same? The next morning, as Amara polished the hotel's glass windows, she overheard two workers whispering near the lobby. "They say Don Obi wasn't always this powerful," one said. "Yes," the other replied. "He was once just Obinna, a boy from a wealthy family. They say something happened in his youth that changed him, turned him into the man he is today." Amara's hand froze on the window. Obinna. The name was like an arrow straight to her heart. Later that day, Marco Don Obi's trusted aide appeared at the hotel. His sharp eyes scanned the cleaners until they landed on her. "You? Come with me?" Fear gripped her. She followed him to a waiting car, her hands trembling. The ride through Abuja was silent, but her thoughts screamed, "What does he want with me?" The car stopped before the towering gates of the Nwankwo mansion in Maitama. Guards opened the doors. Amara stepped out, her legs weak, and was led inside. The mansion was vast, its halls lined with portraits and guarded corridors. It felt less like a home and more like a fortress. Don Obi waited in his study, seated behind a massive mahogany desk. His injured arm rested on the table, and still wrapped around it was the faded scarf she had tied. Amara's breath caught. He kept it? "Sit," he said quietly. His voice was calm, but it carried weight that left no room for disobedience. She sat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. For a long moment he studied her, his eyes unreadable. Then he spoke. "Why did you help me on that train? You didn't know who I was. You could have ignored me. Everyone else did." Amara swallowed hard. "Because you were bleeding, and no one deserves to suffer alone." His jaw tightened. His gaze softened for just a moment. "No one has ever touched me without fear, until you." The silence stretched, heavy with unspoken truths. Then slowly, he leaned forward. "Amara," he said, his voice low. "You don't remember me, do you?" Her breath caught. The question trembled in the air, pulling her back through time. To the classroom. To the laughter. To the boy who had tied his jacket around her waist. Her eyes widened as realization struck like lightning. "Obinna, Don Obi." Her heart raced. "It's you," she whispered. A faint, almost sorrowful smile touched his lips. "Yes, it's me." Amara's chest heaved with shock, relief, and fear tangled into one. The boy she had never forgotten was now the man the whole city feared. And in that revelation, her world shifted forever. The room felt heavy as Amara sat across from Don Obi, her heart pounding. The revelation still rang in her ears. This man, feared across Abuja, was none other than Obinna Nwankwo, the boy who once bore pain for her in a schoolyard. Her eyes lingered on the faded scarf still tied around his arm. He could have thrown it away, but he hadn't. That small act spoke louder than all his power. "You remember now?" he said quietly, watching her with steady eyes. Amara's voice trembled. "Yes, I remember. You were the boy who gave me your jacket, who took the cane in my place." A faint smile tugged at his lips, though his eyes remained shadowed. "And you were the girl who taught me that kindness doesn't need words." The silence stretched between them. Memories of youth clashed with the reality of the present. He was no longer the quiet boy. He was Don Obi, the boss of bosses, ruler of empires, surrounded by enemies. Amara's chest tightened. Can I trust him, or will his world swallow me whole? Sensing her turmoil, he leaned forward. "Amara, I know what your father tried to do. I know he planned to sell you off to pay his debts." Her eyes widened. How do you know that? His gaze hardened. There is nothing in this city I don't know. He paused, his tone softening. But hear me, I will not let anyone hurt you. Not your father, not his debts, no one, ma. Amara's hands trembled in her lap. His words carried weight not just as a promise, but as a command. Yet behind them was something else. Something she hadn't expected. Sincerity. Why me? She whispered. You could protect anyone. Why care about me? For the first time, the mask of Don Obi slipped. His voice was low, almost vulnerable. Because when the whole world feared me, you didn't. You saw a man bleeding and you reached out. No one has ever done that for me. Her chest swelled with emotions she couldn't name: fear, gratitude, confusion, and the faint stirring of something warmer. But her grandmother's face flashed in her mind. Mama Rose, lying weak in the clinic bed, waiting. That was her priority. That was her purpose. She rose slowly, her voice firm despite the tears threatening her eyes. I don't want your power, Obi. I only want the money to save my grandmother. After that, I will go. His jaw tightened, pain flickering across his face before it hardened into resolve. You can go if you want, he said, but until your grandmother is safe, you will not walk this city alone. Not while I am here. Amara's heart pounded. She didn't know if it was fear or trust that kept her rooted in place. All she knew was that her life was no longer just hers. Fate had entangled it with the boy she once knew and the man the city feared. The next days blurred together as Amara Okafor continued her work at the Grand Royal Hotel. Yet nothing felt the same. Everywhere she went, she felt the weight of eyes on her, not the mocking stares of coworkers, but the unseen presence of men watching from distance. It was Don Obi's doing. When she walked to the market, she noticed a black car parked quietly by the roadside. When she returned to the hotel, a suited man lingered in the shadows. She realized he had meant his words. You will not walk this city alone, not while I am here. At first she resented it. She did not want his shadow looming over her life. But one evening as she left work, 3 rough-looking men cornered her near a dimly lit street. Pretty girl, one sneered. Looks like you lost your way. Amara's heart raced. She stepped back, clutching her bag. But before fear could paralyze her, the black car door opened, and 2 of Don Obi's men appeared. Their presence alone was enough. The thugs scattered into the night. Her breath came in shaky bursts. She realized then, without his unseen protection, Abuja's streets could have devoured her. Later that night, Marco appeared at her quarters. Boss asked me to give you this, he said, handing her a small envelope. Inside were crisp notes, 1 million naira. Amara's chest tightened. She had begged, fought, struggled, and failed, and now here it was, the money to save Mama Rose, placed in her hand because of him. Tears filled her eyes. Tell him I don't want to be bought, she whispered, her pride wrestling with gratitude. Marco gave her a long look. This isn't about buying you. It's about saving the woman who raised you. Take it. That night, Amara wept silently, the envelope clutched to her chest. She thought of Mama Rose lying weak in the clinic, waiting for hope. And she thought of Don Obi, the boy who once shielded her from shame, now the man who shielded her from a city's dangers. But even as gratitude swelled within her, fear crept close. His world was not hers. His power came at a price, and she didn't know if she was ready to pay it. The following week, Amara Okafor traveled back to Oji River with the money. The journey was long, but her heart carried a fragile hope. When she handed the envelope to the weary doctor at the clinic, tears of relief ran down her cheeks. "Mama Rose will be prepared for surgery immediately," he said gently. Amara clutched her grandmother's frail hand. "You'll be fine, Mama. You'll get through this." The old woman smiled weakly. "My child, I always told you, kindness returns in unexpected ways." Her eyes glistened. "Remember that." Amara stayed until the operation was complete. Mama Rose survived, though weak, and Amara left with a heart full of gratitude, but also a storm of confusion. She could no longer deny it. Without Don Obi, her grandmother might not have lived. Back in Abuja, she returned to the hotel. Days passed in quiet work, but her thoughts kept drifting to the man who had sent Marco with the envelope, who had shielded her from danger, who still carried her scarf around his arm like a sacred bandage. One evening, the lobby was nearly empty when Don Obi himself walked in. His presence filled the space, sharp suit gleaming, his aura commanding. Yet when his eyes found hers, something in his expression softened. "Come," he said simply. She hesitated, her instincts screaming to flee, but something deeper pulled her to follow. He led her to the rooftop of the hotel, where Abuja's skyline glittered under the night. For a long moment they stood in silence, the cool wind tugging at her scarf. Then he spoke, his voice quieter than she had ever heard it. "Do you know why I became Don Obi?" he asked. His eyes were fixed on the city lights, but his words were far away. "Because the world taught me that kindness was weakness, that to survive, I had to become harder than stone." Amara looked at him, her heart aching. "But you weren't always like this. I remember you, Obinna. You were kind. You were brave." He turned, his eyes locking onto hers, and for a fleeting moment, she saw it the boy from Royal Crest College, the one who had stood tall under the teacher's cane, the one who had shielded her from shame. Her breath caught. "Amara," he said softly, "you remind me of who I used to be. When you tied that scarf on my arm, for the first time in years, I didn't feel like Don Obi. I felt like myself." Her chest tightened, tears burning in her eyes. She wanted to tell him she understood, that she saw both the boy and the man. But fear lingered. His world was built on shadows and power, and hers was fragile, pure, and untainted. "I don't belong in your world," she whispered. "I can't walk in your shadows." His jaw clenched, but his gaze remained steady. "Then let me walk in yours." Amara's heart raced, torn between terror and tenderness. In that moment, she realized her greatest struggle was not with the city, her father, or even fate. It was with her own heart, wavering between fear of the Mafia boss and trust in the boy she once knew. The days that followed were heavy with silence and questions. Amara Okafor kept her distance, torn between gratitude for Don Obi's protection and fear of what his shadow meant for her future. Yet fate was not finished with them. One evening, as she walked back from the market, she noticed the same rough men who had once cornered her. This time they didn't scatter. They stepped out of the alley, their eyes sharp. "Your father still owes," one hissed, "and now you are the payment." Amara's blood ran cold. She turned to flee, but they closed in until the screech of tires cut through the night. Black cars pulled up, doors flung open, and men in dark suits stormed out. The thugs scattered instantly. From the car stepped Don Obi, his presence as heavy as thunder. His eyes blazed as he looked at her trembling form. "You see?" he said, voice low, controlled. This is why I cannot leave you unguarded. Your father's sins are not yours. Yet you will always bear the weight, unless I stand in the way. Tears filled Amara's eyes. For the first time she saw clearly. This man, feared by many, was not protecting her to own her, but because he could not let harm touch her. Her voice shook. But Obi, what if your world destroys me? What if I lose myself in your shadows? He stepped closer, his face softening. Then I will give up the shadows for you. You showed me kindness when the world only gave me cruelty. You reminded me of who I was. Don Obi is for the world, but for you, I am Obinna. Amara's chest heaved as his words sank deep. The boy she had once loved in silence was still alive beneath the armor of the Mafia boss. Her tears fell freely, but this time they were not of fear. They were of release. I don't want your power, she whispered. I only want truth. If you can be Obinna, then maybe I can be by your side. He reached for her hand, strong, steady, yet tender. For the first time since her mother's death, since her father's betrayal, Amara felt safe. Not because she was shielded by walls of power, but because someone finally chose to stand with her, not over her. The city roared around them, but in that quiet space between two broken souls, a new beginning bloomed. Weeks later, Mama Rose, stronger now, smiled as Amara sat by her bedside and told her everything. The old woman's eyes sparkled with wisdom. My child, kindness always returns. What you gave as a girl has found its way back to you. Love does not always come in the form we expect, but it always comes. Amara nodded, her heart full. She knew the road ahead would not be easy. Loving Obinna meant facing shadows, risking judgment, and standing strong in storms. But she also knew that strength had always been inside her, and now it was inside him too. As dawn broke over Abuja, casting golden light across the skyline, Amara and Obinna walked side by side. No longer the girl who hid in corners, no longer the boy who disappeared in silence, but two souls, bound by kindness, choosing love despite fear.